And today's class is the service program for beginners. We're going to be going over kind of the basics of the software, how to navigate around.
Click telephone. Click telephone.
As well as kind of the main goal of this class is to get you familiar with the task list in our software, what we use tasks for, how we can use tasks to create a work order or generate an invoice that we can send to QuickBooks. Now the screen you're currently seeing is what we call the QuickBooks maintenance menu, and this is how our software synchronizes with QuickBooks, and it's how we manage the data that's in QuickBooks, sending it back and forth, updating customer information. And just so everyone is aware, it is almost, if you want to think of it like a one-way street from QuickBooks into the service program as far as customer information is concerned. Anything that needs to be changed, like a customer address or phone number, email address, that all needs to be done in QuickBooks, and we use this QuickBooks maintenance menu to then update that information in the service program. The top three buttons should manage everything you need. The top button being the kind of overall update. It's going to look at QuickBooks and then bring over a copy of any updated information for customers, inventory, balances. If I just want to update my customer information, that's when I can click Update Only Customers. Or if I just want to update my item information from QuickBooks, I would hit Update Only Inventory. Most of our users do this at least once a day, maybe the first thing when you get in the office or at the end of every day. Now to get to our customer information, we can access it in a couple different ways, one being the customer list, customer info, customer list. And you're going to see a spreadsheet layout of your customers, just like you would see in Excel or maybe in QuickBooks. And they're sorted alphabetically by the customer name. Now we can use right-click to filter, sort, search for customers, kind of really manipulate the data and find what we're looking for. So for instance, maybe I want to see my customer list in reverse alphabetical order. Simple, right-click, sort Z to A. Now anytime I've done any filtering or sorting on the page and I want to bring back the default view, I would just hit reset. Now another handy feature is maybe I want to find all customers in a certain zip code. I could highlight that zip code on my customer list, right-click, and filter by selection. It's then going to show me all customers in that zip code. And again, reset brings back my default view. And I can do this multiple times. So for instance, maybe I want to find all my customers that don't have an email address on file. Well, I could find a blank email, right-click, filter by selection. Now here are all my customers with no email address. Maybe I want to further then drill down and find all my customers with no email in a certain zip code. Well, filter by selection again. Now I've kind of created maybe a call list for all my customers in 32962 with no email address. And let's say I want to either print this or put it in Excel so one of my staff could then call these customers to get updated account information. Well, I could simply right-click, Analyze with Excel. This is a great way to export any data in our software and almost get a custom report. So now everything that we're seeing that we filtered in the service program is now in our spreadsheet. I could also right-click and send my data to Microsoft Word, which is useful if you wanted to do a mail merge, print shipping labels, and send out direct mail marketing. I can pull up a specific customer account using the drop-downs at the top of the page, and I can type a couple letters of a customer name and have it find that customer for me. Now the drop-down boxes are directly searching the customer field here, and it is looking for an exact match. But let's say maybe I wanted to pull up an account by a phone number or an address. Let's say I want to pull up a customer by an address. I could right-click in the customer column, or excuse me, in the address column, and then hit Find. And I could then, it asks me, find what? This is where I can type in my address. And I want to match any part of the address with what I've typed in, and then just hit Find Next. If you'll notice, it'll then highlight any matching addresses, which it did. It found that customer for me. And I could do that on a phone number, address, any of the fields you see here listed. Now, throughout the software, you'll see all the customer names will always be blue and underlined. And this is just a visual indicator so you know that you can double-click on the customer name on any page you're on, and you can drill down and get into that customer's detail page. Now, I could also access customer detail by clicking Customer Info and going right to Customer Detail. Or, like I was mentioning, just double-click the customer name. Again, I have my drop-down box that I could type a couple letters of that customer's name to pull up the account. You see all my information in QuickBooks is now loaded in for this customer. Their billing and shipping address, their sales tax information. And it's important to note that when using the service program, we treat the shipping address line 2 as the physical service address for the customer. All of our mapping and routing, anything where it's looking for a location address is pulling from this shipping address line 2.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. You know, I noticed in my QuickBooks, some of the ship to addresses are just the street and the town. Okay? Do I have to have the customer's name in the ship to address for it to come out right here?
No. For instance, I could, in QuickBooks, I could have a ship to address that's like that.
Okay.
Now I've changed it, and if I update my customers here, and if you see here, I don't know if this is maybe something specific to QuickBooks 2010, but this brings up a good example. If that customer name was removed, it put my address in shipping address line 1. I need that in shipping address line 2. So we would need to make sure that there is a space before the address, some sort of space here to make that on the second line of that shipping address field. And I think QuickBooks auto-corrected it for me when I removed the customer name. It bumped everything up to one line. I would just need to make sure that it's formatted like this in the Edit Ship to Address field in QuickBooks.
Okay.
Now on this customer detail page, we have two fields kind of labeled Note. One is a customer note and one is QuickBooks Notes. QuickBooks Notes, this box, is where all your existing notes in QuickBooks for the customers are going to be displayed. Now this is a read-only field. It's not meant for any type of data entry. It's just meant to display those existing notes history from QuickBooks. Now that you're using the service program going forward, all your service history, account history, any notes for these customers will be stored in our software. The customer note allows you to set a pop-up alert that's displayed anytime this customer is accessed throughout the program. So for instance, I'm going to go ahead and switch to a customer account that already has a pop-up. And here you would go. Here is your customer alert. It would just make whatever message would be displayed, and then it makes that user click OK before they're allowed to do anything with the program. The Additional Info tab is where we have up to 20 customizable fields you can use to start building your customer's profile. For instance, up until recently, QuickBooks only had 2 spots for phone numbers without using custom fields. So here's where we could create a spot, for instance, maybe for a cell phone number, or maybe account status to track whether they're residential or commercial. And I can name these fields just by clicking into the white space left of the field, and I can type the label. Now I can track whether this is maybe a residential or commercial account. And by setting the field for one customer, that now every customer will have that field on their Additional Info page.
Bill, I got a question on that.
Yes, sir.
So all these fields that are blank right now, as soon as I start making something like you just did, account status, or making another phone number, once if I make one for a phone number, then that will automatically come up on the task sheet? Like
now
when I print out the work order for the guys?
These first 8 fields on the left column will print out on the work order, correct? Whatever you've labeled them. Another important setting is our default delivery method. This controls, if it's not set in QuickBooks, this would control how a customer's invoice is delivered. If it's flagged for email, every invoice that we send to QuickBooks would be marked as email. That way it would be included in a batch email on the QuickBooks end. If we had selected print, it would then queue up in your print batch when you go to print invoices. And again, this is derived from QuickBooks. Under the Additional Info, there's a preferred send method, none, mail, or email. The Equipment tab is where we can set up any customer-owned or serviced equipment. This is great for in the pool industry, tracking maybe the customer's different filter sizes or their pump type, any extra information like that. If you're doing any type of service work on equipment at the customer's property or equipment that they purchased from you, you can store that information here, and this also can be pulled onto the work order and printed out so the tech knows maybe what they're working on. So I can maybe set up a piece of equipment. And just by typing the equipment name, you can see it's blue and underlined. And that's going to use kind of the same theme we have in our software. Anything blue and underlined, we can double click to edit. I'm just going to mark this equipment as active, and then I'm going to double click its name. Now I can get into the equipment detail where I could set up maybe the last time it was serviced, any warranty information, service tag number. By selecting print, that would then allow this to be printed on the work orders. If this customer was on a route for scheduled service, we could then pick a frequency that maybe that this particular unit is serviced. Any notes for the equipment, and then again we have custom fields that can be defined here. Maybe color, size, serial number. The Additional Contacts tab is where we can store any other information that we need to keep track of that maybe pertains to this customer, such as if this is a property management company or a large commercial account. You may be working with 4 or 5 different people any given week for an appointment. And you can just keep track of all those additional customers here. The Pricing tab is where we could set up what we charge this customer for any scheduled service or any custom pricing on any products or services. Now we can use this pricing also when we get into our routing and mapping class. We'll be going into a little bit more detail, but this pricing can help control a monthly automatic billing, whether it's generating an invoice per service or using this information to generate a batched invoice maybe once a month. And I can just hit Edit Pricing. And when I hit the drop down, it's asking me for an item name. So maybe I can put in a labor item. And when I select that item, you can see that the QuickBooks default is $70 for maybe an hour of labor. Now maybe this is a high volume customer or they've been with you since you opened and you give them a little discount on the labor. Well, without having to change that item in QuickBooks or create another item for that labor charge, I can just adjust this customer's specific price for labor. Maybe make it $60 an hour. Anything invoiced with the line item labor will now remember this $60 price. File link, as you can see here, it's a great way to link any documents to this customer. It works very much like QuickBooks Attachments. I can just hit Browse and then pick any document that I want to attach to the customer, whether it be a spreadsheet, Word document, a picture, a video, PDF. And then you would just double click to open up that document. Now to delete anything in our software, it's as simple as right-click, delete record. I also could select the row I want to delete by using the record selectors on the far left. Those are those little boxes. I can just select one, and that would be referencing that you're selecting that whole row. And then I could press delete on my keyboard. Now we have a couple buttons at the top of the page for quick navigation. And this is why a lot of our customers like to use customer details, kind of the home screen, when working with our program, especially if you're in the position where you're answering the phones or taking any of the incoming calls, because you can quickly pull up a customer account. All their information is right in front of you, their balance, taxing information, any invoicing or scheduled service history, as well as the quick buttons to create a quote, a task, email them directly. So if I click email customer, it's going to prompt me to send a quick message to this customer. And then when the email is sent, it's going to prompt me to add this to the customer's notes. If I hit yes, it's now stored in the customer's history that I emailed that customer. And we're actually going to come take a look at customer history here once we've created our first work order in just a moment. I can click Map for this customer, and it's going to quickly pull up it's going to pull up MapQuest right in your web browser and give you turn-by-turn directions from your company's address to this customer.
Bill, I got map points, and I don't know. I guess I'm having a hard time syncing it to this because it wouldn't work.
Now, map point only works for our route schedule.
Oh, so what map is it for doing stuff like this?
If you hit customer detail, it's mapping with MapQuest, the actual website.
Oh. Well, do you have to tell it how to get to MapQuest?
Nope. As long as the customer has a address, city, state, and zip in their correct fields here.
Okay. Maybe I didn't have that on the first go around when I tried that.
Let me show you one other place you would need to make sure you have an address, and that would be for your company. If you go to Miscellaneous Info, System, and then Control Table Maintenance, this is where all the software settings are. You would need to make sure your company has an address in here, because that's where it's pulling the starting address from.
Okay, I got you. I'll check that. I got one other question. But before you go on to the tasks, back on the first page of the customer list, could you bring that up? Okay, so in the middle of the page there where it says contact, between contact and date created, there's the blue dots. Mm-hmm. On mine, some are blue dots, some aren't. What does the blue dot signify?
That signifies whether it's an active customer in QuickBooks.
And is active the same as what it means in QuickBooks? I've either marked it inactive or active, or does it mean it's got it like it goes back to a certain date history?
If it does not have a blue dot, that means it's an inactive customer in QuickBooks. So it would be same as marking a customer inactive, and it hides it. What I'd recommend is go to that System Control Table Maintenance.
Right.
Turn on the update to show only active customers.
Mm-hmm.
And then bring up your QuickBooks Maintenance menu and hit Update Only Customers. It'll then take out all the customers that aren't active in QuickBooks. That way you're only seeing the ones just like I do with the little blue dots.
Okay, great.
All right, so when you do first log in and you get past the QuickBooks Maintenance menu, the very next screen you see is the Employee Task List. Now this is the go-to for any company communication, as well as it'll be where you're managing your day-to-day work orders. Now just to clarify before we get into this, we have two real ways to manage jobs in the service program. You have jobs that are based off a frequency or some sort of pre-scheduled service that repeats. that is managed off the route schedule for the most part. Tasks are what are mainly used for one-time services, service calls, generating that one-off work order for a repair technician. Now, the reason why we call it a task is simply because it can do a whole lot more than that. The tasks are your action items. You can create a task to remind an employee to follow up with a lead or prospect. You could create a task to, of course, generate a work order and then turn that work order into an invoice and send it to QuickBooks. So from anything that you need an invoice for to anything non-billable, we can use a task. And a task can have a reoccurring schedule. So a lot of times I see in the pool industry, you have your scheduled weekly service for the customers set up on the route schedule, and then maybe additional services, maybe quarterly or monthly filter changes or filter checks would be done maybe through a reoccurring task. Now, to create a task, it's real simple. Just hit the green plus sign, task entry. The very first thing we're prompted for is to select a customer. And again, here's that customer alert that we can set at the customer detail. The very next thing we would need to select is what we call a task type. And this task type is simply just the reason why you're creating the task. Now, I've created a couple here, but if you're new to the software, your task type, that drop-down is blank, and you can create new ones just by typing right on that line. So I'm going to create maybe this task for a service call. Now, it's not in this list, so when I hit Tab to move down to the next field, it's going to prompt me, do I want to save it and add it now? Hit yes, and now you've added your first task type in the drop-down, so you can use it on any future task. Now I can key in a task description, or a little bit more of an explanation of maybe what the technician needs to do. So maybe customer called and the pump is leaking, or the customer called and requested whatever service.
Now, when it says visible to customer, so I noticed when I was playing around with this, when I go to do the invoice, this is the first line on the invoice, correct?
Exactly, and that's why we put that little message there to make you aware that the customer will see anything in the task description and the resolution field.
Now, I also, I know I'm jumping a little bit, but the resolution box, and you're going to tell us that, you got a click down in that. When I hit the resolution box and put done, okay, and then I go into the field, okay, we fixed the pump. When I go back to the task, the resolution box is always empty. We fixed pump is on the invoice it says resolution, it says fixed pump, but the resolution box itself is always empty. Could you explain that?
Yeah, I'll get there when I go to actually closing out this work order. Let me first just get through creating the task and then kind of some of the different views, and then we will go through, close this out, and invoice it to QuickBooks so you can see the whole process. Now, our task-specific notes, we can use this field 1 for just office notes. If it is looking like it is right now in my software with that show on work ticket not selected, this would only be visible for users accessing the software on their desktop. It would not show up on the invoice or the work order. Now, if I show on work ticket, the tech will be able to see it either on its mobile device or on a hard copy work order. My resolution, again, is also visible to the customer, and we take the task description and the resolution and populate the first line of the invoice with any notes in those two fields. Now, we do have a similar drop-down for the resolution, and before we can select or create a resolution, we should double-click in this field first, and it will take us to our resolution descriptions, where I can create a couple different, maybe some quick selections with some static verbiage in there that'll populate on the invoice. Maybe work complete, thank you for your business. Something simple. So I'm going to create a quick name, just done, and then in the box to the right, I can just type a little message in there. And you can create multiple of these. But now if I select a resolution of done, it'll populate the box for me. Now when I close this out, invoice it or post it to notes, you may not see anything in the drop-down here. What actually matters is what's in the resolution box below it. We can track an authorization or a PO number for the work order. We can also create a checklist and attach it to this work order. And a checklist is simply a great way to get some custom fields to print out on our work orders. And if I double-click where it says inspection, or if you don't have any checklist set up, you could double-click in this field or go to Task Info, Maintain Checklists. And you can see here I've just created a simple checklist with 3 items on it. Did we check the attic? And then I put a little spot for the technician to check off yes or no. And I gave him a line for some notes. I can create a new checklist just by starting on the new line. Maybe I want to record the payment information. So I'm going to create a payment checklist. Item number 1 on the payment checklist. Just going to put payment method and give my tech a little spot to check off whether it was cash, credit, or check. Now the due date is when this work order is scheduled for. And this can be set, it defaults to today's date when you create a new task. If this was due maybe for tomorrow or later in the week, I would just select the date. I then could assign this task to a particular employee, maybe a route tech, or I could assign it to a department, maybe service. And then I could further sub-assign it to the tech that's doing the job. Call concerning allows me to maybe track a callback. So I could maybe put the original technician's name if this was a callback to go address the same issue. And you can run a report off this field and get, for instance, all the callbacks per tech in any date range.
Bill, I got a question for you regarding this.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so, you know, a lot of times a service call will come in. It's something that's got to get done, but, you know, it can get done anytime this week. Okay, so how would we handle, you know, like the date and time aspect of that? We know who we want to do it. How would we handle the date and time of that?
You would, I would recommend leaving the due date, whatever date you're creating that work order for, and then you have a field time frame requested that you could track, you know, due within 1 week, due by a certain date, or if it's maybe something that he could get done anytime this week, well, I'm creating the task for today, he's going to see it, but it's not due until Friday. That's when it needs to be complete.
Okay.
Now my start time and end time, I could use it for direct scheduling. This appointment will take an hour, and you can run a report off this and get billable hours this way. How a lot of our users prefer to use this is, especially out in the field, if you're using our mobile devices, you could change this, or the tech can, to record the actual time on site. So you may use this in the office initially as a service window. The tech will be there from 10:30 to 12:30. He sees it on his mobile device and then edits this to the actual time he was there and the time he finished. My task type questions are a great way to start scripting my incoming calls. So for instance, every time I select service call, I could have a preloaded set of questions here populate. That way the receptionist or whoever's answering the phones can then key in the answers, and those also can be printed out on the work order for the tech to see. I can go to line items, which is a tab at the top of our task. So we have task detail, line items. And here's where I could select any parts or labor charges, service items that I'm going to be needing to bill for this work order. And this is your full QuickBooks item list. This wouldn't need to be done when you're creating the task. You could do it when you're closing it out, or the tech can do this on his smartphone in the field. Now, if you see, I have a button, Load Preferred Items. What that's going to do is automatically take anything from that customer's pricing page that we looked at a moment ago and put it onto the work order for me with their specific price. Now, if you remember, I also mentioned that if we use this line item labor and a customer has a specific price on it, it'll remember it for us. So if I just pull up the labor item, and you can see here my QuickBooks item list, it's set at $70. But when I add it to this customer, they have a preferred price. It remembers that of $60. Additional info. This is relatively new to our software. Its primary target was for our pest control companies, but it can be utilized by anyone in the program. And allows you up to 30 custom fields for the work orders. These are all drop-down based, and they can be populated just by typing data in them, and it'll ask you, do you want to save it to the list? You can change your field names by hitting the Edit Field Names. And if we take off any label here, it will leave that and turn it into a blank field on the other screen. So you don't have to see all 30 of these. You could only see the ones you needed. As of right now, the main use for this is to print to one, either our Word templates in the software, which we get into in our kind of intermediate class, as well as the Q&A class we do on Fridays. We touch on the Word templates. And then in about, I would probably say about 30 to 60 days, we'll have these ready for the mobile devices, where you'll actually be able to see these custom fields, whatever you've labeled them, and be able to select the data in the field and have it come back across onto the work order. The equipment tab on a task, I could hit Get Equipment, and then any customer equipment is then loaded onto the work order, and I could select that we're servicing that equipment today. I could hit Reoccurring Schedule, and here's how I can take a simple work order and have it repeat on a given frequency: weekly, monthly, yearly, or no end date. And let's say this is going to be some kind of maybe monthly reoccurring work order. Maybe we're doing a filter check. Maybe it's a simple reminder for someone in the office to just give that customer a call. And I could have this reoccur, first, second, third, fourth, last given day of every 1, 2, or 3 months. Or I could just do it simply maybe every 28 days with no end date. I can hit map at the top to map directly from company's address to the customer using MapQuest again. I can hit check availability, and this will use Microsoft MapPoint. It will give me the current customer and the date requested for service. And what I'm seeing here on the lower half are my reoccurring tasks that I just created. That's why we see the same task twice down here. If I had other tasks in the software, other work orders created, I could hit get distance, and it's going to search through anything currently scheduled and tell me who's the closest customer that I've already got scheduled, what tech's doing that service. And then I could schedule this new work order before or after the existing one. That way I know that my tech's already going to be in the area. So it's a great way to schedule by distance. I could email a work order and let them know that a new work order has been created for them. I could also do that same email to my technician as either an email, or 2 as a text message. Now this is great, especially if they're using our mobile devices. They may not be in the app looking at it all the time to check for the updates. They may have the phone in the pocket while they're working, and sending this via email would notify their phone. They would get that notification, whatever sound their phone makes, new email. They'd see they had a new work order created. So then they could pull out our mobile app, sync, and get the new work order right on their phone. I'm going to go ahead and hit close to create this work order, and that's something you'll find out. Our software, we don't really have a create or save button. It's based on Microsoft Access, so it's a database program. Records are saved as you key them in. So just by hitting close, it's going to save everything on here for us. And now we see our one work order that we just created. It is outlined in yellow, letting us know it's due today. And that's based on the due date. If this was a job from yesterday that wasn't completed, so maybe my due date was the 3rd. When I walked into the office the morning of the 4th, it's going to be red, letting me know that this task is past due and needs to be addressed. This color coding follows all the way to the mobile device. So if the tech had this work order yesterday, it's going to be outlined in yellow on his phone. When he came in this morning, it would be red on his phone. Now I can go ahead and print out this work order. This is our standard work order template. And right now it's only printing out my line items and my task description. Right here, entered by, assigned to, where it says residential, those are my custom fields, task priority. Let me go ahead and turn on some more settings here so we can see what else will print on the work order. I'm going to go to System, and then Control Table Maintenance. I can go to the Task tab. Here's where I can then set up what I want to print out on this work order. I can show the balance, the billing address, the telephone number, the subdivision or gate code. Do I want the address line 1? Show those task type questions on the work order. If you do any rental items, you could show those on the work order. Version of the work order. Here are our pre-built templates. And if you want all of 8 of those customer info fields, those custom fields that you could set up per customer to print out on the work order, this is the version you'd want to print. All customer info fields would print those first 8 in that left column. I'm just turning on a couple settings here, but pretty much just turning everything to yes so we can see exactly what gets printed out. Notes history on the task. So now you can see I have my customer notes history is printing out on my work order. So any previous tasks, all their history would show up here for my tech to see. Now these color boxes at the top of the page control or basically filter our task list. If I want to see everything past due, I could click the red box. Everything due today, click the yellow box. Then of course everything upcoming, click the green box. Here's where we see that reoccurring task that we created. Every 28 days, it has an automatic work order generated for me. And I could hit reset again, just like I would on the customer page to bring back the default view. We have a separate list to manage reoccurring tasks, and that's found under Task Info, Reoccurring Task List. You can see here I've got one item on my list, and it's for that one reoccurring task we just created. I can double-click my task number, and I get a nice menu where maybe I want to see this customer's full reoccurring schedule. Just click the button. This now shows me every time I'm going to be at that customer, and you can see it's taken out my work orders all the way out to 2015. Now we kind of cap it off here just so it doesn't create a very large database right off the bat when you have a bunch of reoccurring tasks. So as you get further and further into this year, it'll take tasks further and further out. Since we selected no end date, these tasks will automatically keep generating until you either delete the reoccurring task list or possibly update it and set a specific end date. If I want to delete all the reoccurring tasks in the series, we'll just bring up that menu, delete reoccurring task schedule. So now I've only got that one task. Maybe you're more used to seeing more of a kind of Outlook style calendar or some sort of calendar view instead of a list of the work orders. Well, I could go to Task Info and then Schedule View. Here I can see an Outlook style calendar, and if I hit Employees, there's a button at the top. I can then pick which employees I want to see on my calendar. So now I'm looking at today, March 4th, for my 3 employees. I can maybe look at a week view for all 3. So there's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so on, all the way Thursday and Friday. This is a drag and drop calendar, so you can use this for scheduling. So if I want to reassign this work order to Bill, just simply drag it over. If I want to open up this task right from the calendar, just double click on it. If you notice, it's already reassigned the task for me to Bill. So anything you do on the calendar will affect the task.
I got a question for you, Bill. I mean, yeah. When I double click, like right now you got 2 o'clock highlighted. If I click on that and it takes me to the task, okay, and if we're gonna enter a new task now, or whoever. Okay, how come it doesn't put the date and time in? So in this field, we still have to put in the date and time we want. It doesn't directly transfer it from the calendar?
Correct. As it's functioning right now, yes, sir, you do have to still adjust the technician and the start time and end time from the calendar.
Okay. Is that something you guys are working on to try and make it so that it's seamless?
Yes, correct. We're actually going to be updating our calendar module in the software to also incorporate a web-based version that is going to have all that functionality.
Okay, great.
So now let's go through, and this task is done. The tech's completed the work. He's either filled out all the details on his mobile device, he's typed in a resolution, marked it as complete, and hit sync, or he's turned in that hard copy work order. So we're going to go in and open up the task. I'm going to put in my resolution and maybe enter closing notes for this job. And then I have my 2 options. I can either invoice it or I can post it to notes. If I need to generate that invoice and send that to QuickBooks, I would hit the invoice button. If maybe this is non-billable and I just want it stored in the customer's history and off my task list, I'm going to hit post to notes. I'm going to go ahead and hit invoice.
I got another question here. One of the guys told me that you got to have a spot on your item list in the QuickBooks called notes or something, because when I hit invoice, I get an error that things aren't quite set up right.
Correct. If you look here, when I hit invoice, that first line of the invoice has my task description and my resolution.
Right.
I've got an item called notes that is automatically populated on that first line for me. We need to make sure that in that control table, so again, miscellaneous info, system, control table, the default notes item is selected. Now this doesn't have to be notes. It could be called work order description. It could be called labor. Whatever item you want to use from QuickBooks to populate on that first line, you can select it here.
Okay.
Now what I have just simply done is in QuickBooks, I went to lists, item list, then I went to item, new item, and I made it a service item called notes. I left my description blank, my price blank. I just attached it to any income account. And then hit OK, and you've created a notes item. I would now then just in the service program hit my update QuickBooks and then update only inventory. Then I could select notes in that drop down. Now going forward, once you've done that, any new work order that you invoice, it'll populate whatever item you have selected there on that first line. Now real quickly, I'm just going to close this invoice. If you look, I that one task we were working with is gone. It's been complete, so it's off my task list. I can find it again by going Task Info, Completed Tasks. And here it is from today. I could also go to Open Invoices. And here you see that open invoice we created. And I can double click the order number to pull back up the invoice. Then I can hit Post to QuickBooks. Now, if you notice in our newest version of the software, we have a customer message drop-down. This right here you can populate with your QuickBooks customer messages and select it so that it carries over on the QuickBooks invoice. I'm going to go ahead and hit Post to QuickBooks. When it's finished, you will see that Posted to QuickBooks is selected. That's how I know that it did make it to QuickBooks. So if I close that, it's no longer an open invoice. It's a closed invoice. Then if I go to QuickBooks, I should see that invoice there. And here it is. The last thing I want to show you is how we can see our customer's history now that we've created a work order and invoiced it. Bring up my customer list. I'm going to go into Customer Detail. Then I'm going to go to the Notes tab. The Notes tab is where all your customer's history from tasks are going to be stored, as well as any email communication right from our software. Do you see that test email I sent? It's stored in the customer's history. Here's our most recent work order, all the notes from it. I can double-click that work order number again to quickly bring up the closed task. And then here's where I could select multiple entries and hit Print. And now I have a printable customer history report where you're picking what you want the customer to see. And that's about all the time we have for our beginners class this morning. I will take just a minute or two if anyone has a quick question over kind of what we just went over. All right. Well, I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon. We will be doing our afternoon class this afternoon at 2 o'clock Eastern. And to find all our training classes and to find our new online help, just hit Miscellaneous Info from the top toolbar in the Service Program, and then go to View Online Help. From here, I could look at different how-to section, or go to Training Classes to register for this afternoon, where we're doing the routing and mapping. Take care, everyone. I hope to see you in a couple hours.
Thank you.
Anytime.